Greetings from Womack Bible Chapel. Bit of a different location today. The other week we're out here. We sleep out by my garden. Okay, so 5-minute devotional. Oswald Chambers, my utmost for his highest. What my obedience to God costs other people. Now, as they led him away, they laid hold of a certain man, Simon, and on him they laid the cross that he might bear it after Jesus. Luke 23:26. If we obey God, it is going to cost other people more than it costs us. And that is where the sting comes in. If we are in love with our Lord, obedience does not cost us anything. It is the delight. But it costs those who do not love him a good deal. If we obey God, it will mean that other people's plans are upset, and they will jibe us with it. If you call this Christianity, we can prevent the suffering, but if we are going to obey God, we must not prevent it. We must let the cost be paid. Our human pride entrenches itself on this point, and we say, I will never accept anything from anyone. We shall have to, or disobey God. We have no right to expect to be in any other relation than our Lord himself was in. Luke 8:2-3. Stagnation in spiritual life comes when we say we will bear the whole thing ourselves. We cannot. We are so involved in the universal purposes of God that immediately we obey God, others are affected. Are we going to remain loyal in our obedience to God and go through the humiliation or refusing to be independent? Or are we going to take the other line and say, I will not cost other people suffering? We can disobey God if we choose, and it will bring immediate relief to the situation. But we shall be a grief to our Lord, whereas if we obey God, he will look after those who have been pressed into the consequences of our obedience. We have simply to obey and to leave all consequences with him. Beware of the inclination to dictate to God as to what you will allow to happen if you obey him. We have simply to obey and to leave all consequences with him. So, this is a problem that goes on quite often. So, you might have a household, and you've got one person in the household that wants to serve and to obey and to love God. And that requires that they witness, it requires that they begin fellowship with other Christians, it requires that they attend services where God is glorified and where they can learn from the Bible. Now, if they've got someone else in the household who doesn't want to do that, who doesn't agree with that, then the pressure is to withdraw yourself from those activities so the other person is not put out. But the greater glory goes to God when you put him first. So, if you're in a marriage relationship, for example, and one of you wants to go to church to worship and serve God, and the other one wants you to stay home so they're not pressured to go to church, or because so they don't feel guilty, or because they don't agree with it, and you give in to that, then you're putting them before God. Now, in a marriage relationship, in any relationship, when you're a Christian, it should be God first, and then the next person down. So God first, and then if you're a husband or a wife, then you're a husband or wife, and then your children and your parents and so on and so on. Your work, employer responsibilities there, but God must always come first. And you are doing a disservice to the other person if you don't uphold God by your life. So if you withdraw yourself from obedience to God so they're not offended, or so that they don't feel guilty, or they're not put out, or so they can go on the picnic or do the other activity they want to do when you're at church or you're in whatever it is you're doing for God, then you're actually not witnessing to them effectively. You're not showing them that God comes first in your life, and you're not giving them the opportunity later to join you in that. So if you've got two options, and one of the options is the non-Christian says, come and do this activity with me, all right? And the other option is go and do an activity that involves God, okay? And you say, okay, well, I'll do the activity with the one that doesn't love God because that won't upset them, and I'll forsake the activity that involves God, then you are never giving them the opportunity in the future to join you in the activity with God, because they're not going to necessarily instigate it, but they will then join you with it if they give it. And we've seen many examples of that in households where the husband or the wife takes a stand, or the parent takes a stand and says, we're going to church, we're going to serve God, we're doing this for God today. And then over time, the rest will follow in line, the rest will come along. And you have to give them the opportunity to do that by leading by example. We want our children to follow us in all things. And the way to do that is not by telling them, even though information is correct, but by leading by example. So let's lead by example in our life with the Lord.